however.
Part of your intro, part of your bio, was that you were part of the legendary Indiana swim team before joining. Now, I'm from Washington State. I've never I never did any professional swimming. I never did any amateur swimming, anything like that. So I didn't know that Indiana had a legendary program. I mean, what was it? Is it multiple NCAA titles? Any names that pop out from the program that I would know?
Mark Spitz.
Oh, of course.
uh,
There it is. There it is. Yes, sir.
Indiana really, they became such a powerhouse under the direction of their swim coach, Doc Councilman. He just went by Doc. Dr. James Councilman was really a real innovator in the sport. And then he ended up with a diving coach who was, just as overqualified. And his name was Hobie Billingsley. And between Hobie and Doc, they put through some of the best swimmers and divers in the history of the sport. And their legacy really goes back to the early 60s. And I want to say 1956 is when they got their start, but I think in the early 60s is when they really became a powerhouse. And so the likes of Charlie Keating, Jim Montgomery, Mark Spitz, of course, and to swim in the same swimming pool as those guys was really, really remarkable. And when he gave me a phone call my senior year in high school and said he wanted me to swim for Indiana, I couldn't get down there fast enough.
It's like what wrestling is to Iowa and Minnesota is what Indiana is to swimming.
Who? I'm just kidding. Iowa was actually one of our competitors, but
I did that. I know I did that on purpose.
That's like saying Purdue. It's a dirty word in Indiana. That's actually you probably saw that I was a SEAL for a very short time. That's actually how I became a SEAL, was that I was in nuclear power school for the Navy, and I was wearing an Indiana University swimming T-shirt, and a guy came over to me and said, "Did you swim for Doc Councilman?" I said, "I did," and he started telling me what he knew about the Indiana program, and then he says, "Well, if you're smart enough to be a nuclear guy and you can swim for Indiana University, what about the SEALs?" And I said, "I don't know anything about the SEALs. Tell me more." And a couple of weeks later, I was passing the screening test and on my way to Coronado, California to start BUDS.
And you haven't left. You're still in Coronado, right?
I am. Not only when I graduated from BUDS, I was assigned to SEAL Team 5, which was also in Coronado. And when I became paralyzed, Coronado is a very flat, it's almost like a sandbar. And old people have been living here for a long time. It's almost a retirement community. And so wheelchair accessibility is years ahead of most places. So I decided to settle here.
Oh, interesting. Stepping back a little bit, what made you join the military in the first place after you college, university, and go like the nuclear route? Because you said you went nuclear route before SEALs.
Yes. So after swimming at Indiana University, I could not take a full load of classes in order to dedicate my time to the sport, because I really went to college to swim and see how far I could take it. And once it became obvious that I was not going to make it to the Olympic team, and after 4 years of college, I still didn't have a degree yet, and I started to panic and thought I needed to change course, and I thought I'd go into the Navy, and that's the nuclear program was something that intrigued me, and there was a route where you could go through nuclear power and then end up getting a college degree and continue my career as an officer in
Gotcha.
the Navy. And again, it was just something that I felt like, I had gone through decades of very structured life with swimming. I was up very early in the morning, swimming double workouts. And I felt like I took as far as I could and felt like I needed a change. And,
The Navy came calling.
but I know you're a veteran and you understand how the military is structured. And that was something that appealed to me. And it was, my father was in the Navy and my grandfather was in the Marine Corps. And I felt I continued
Oh, very good.
that tradition in our family.
Gotcha. So you entered the Navy in '88, and you went to what year did you go to BUDS?
I entered BUDS in 1988.
So right when you came in.
Yeah, nuclear. I started boot camp. I went in the early spring of '88, maybe, and nuclear field A school. After boot camp, nuclear field A school was I think 12 weeks, and then
Oh,
nuclear power school, which was 6 months. So just it was the December of 1988 that I moved out to Coronado, and it may have been after my Christmas vacation that I began Bud. So let's call it January of '89. I was 26 years old. No, excuse me. I was 23 years old when I was going through buds, and I was a little older than most. And because I had a college in my background, I was a little bit more mature, I think. Most of the guys were coming right out of high school. And I was doing well in training, except for I developed an injury. My femoral neck, which is the top of my femur, the femoral head started to come off the femur. And
this is before your accident.
yes, I was, we'll call it involuntarily,
Oh, wow.
removed from training, and I was just devastated because this was something I really wanted to do. I saw it more as a challenge to myself, and I wasn't thinking long term. I was only thinking this was something that was really challenging, and to be removed from training, I'm just not a quitter, and it really was devastating. But my one of my instructors went to the commanding officer and said, "Look, this is a guy that's at the top of his class. Let's see if we can't keep him around somehow." So they basically hid me at Buzz. They changed my naval enlistment code to that of a staff person at Buzz rather than a student. And once I was healed, I went right back to training, and I eventually graduated from
Oh,
Buzz.
wow. Did you start back on day one? Have to go through it again?
No, when you are what they call rolled back for, let's say, medical reasons, what they there's three different phases of training, and they take you back to the last, the phase where you rolled out of. It's not exactly the day that you actually got injured. It would be they would take you back to the first day of that phase that you were in. So I'd already made it through the hell week that you people often hear about. I'd already went through all that, so I restarted my training after hell week.
So deployments were a little more scarce back then in the 80s than what they are now. You said you were on SEAL Team 5. It was more like be ready, wheels go up for a one-off mission type of stuff, correct?
Well, the way when you graduate from Buds, you would go to the Army's jump school in Fort Benning, and you would get your what we call the lead wings,
Okay.
and then you would report to your SEAL team, and then there was advanced training that you would go through. Then you would go to your platoon, and you would do a year workup with your platoon, and then you would deploy to a theater. For all the West Coast teams, you had SEAL teams 1, 3, and 5 back then, and those teams went to the Philippines. So we were doing a workup, getting ready to go to the Philippines when Desert Storm broke out, and that's when they kind of accelerated our workup. And just as our bags were packed and we were ready to jump on a plane, the war was over. We blinked and it was over. So we went back to our platoons and continued our workup. And it was at the end of my workup that I was in a parachuting accident.
Yeah, you were paralyzed in 91 during the parachute accident that you referenced. Do you mind running me through it?
No, not at all. So this was May 21st of 1991, and we had a C-130 that we were going to be using all day. It wasn't just my platoon, but it was a handful of other platoons that needed to get some jumps in before we deployed. And I was in the first stick. Stick is made up of 8 jumpers, and I was the second guy out the door. We jump off the ramp off the back of the C-130, and the number 3 guy collided with me shortly after our chutes opened, and
Oh,
I discovered it was really my combat gear, my rucksack that was really wrapped up in his suspension line. So I I cut away the ruck, but it was too late. My main would not open. I went for my reserve, and I was already about witnesses tell me in my line of duty investigation, it says I was about 150 to 200 feet, and that's just not enough time for the reserve to open.
jeez.
So um,
Yeah.
I landed feet first, but I do recall that in those last, 150 feet goes pretty quickly when you don't have a parachute. And I do recall thinking, this is it. I'm 26 years old, and I don't get to say goodbye to my family and those that I love. And it's a very lonely feeling when you think you're about to die. It's no matter how loud you yell, no one's gonna be there to help you. And I do remember waking up in the drop zone with a circle of my platoon mates, and I remember hearing the helicopter coming to come, medvac me over to Balboa Naval Hospital, and I remember being loaded onto the helicopter and the corpsman kneeling above me and just having a very solemn look on his face and just shaking his head like this is not good. And I was landed on what felt like the rooftop of Balboa Naval Hospital, and I was in the emergency room, and they were, you know, up until that time, I was either an Indiana swimmer or I was labeled as a Navy SEAL, and that was really my identity. And
Yeah.
and to lay there under all these bright lights on this table with people wearing masks and white lab coats, just basically cutting my equipment off of me. I remember telling them, "Don't cut off the shoelaces of my jump boots," and but they're basically very quickly I was being stripped of my identity, and in a matter of seconds, I was just laying there naked, unable to move anything, and they had
Wow.
bolted this thing called a halo onto my head, and I was completely paralyzed, and the room went silent, and I felt like I was there alone, and I just thought about, what next. It was basically the chalkboard had been wiped clean, and I found myself in a state of limbo for the next couple of weeks.
How far was the drop?
It was so we have a drop zone just north of the Mexican border. It's out of Brownsfield. So we jumped static line, which was about 1,200 feet, somewhere in the 1,100 feet.
You were talking about those couple weeks afterwards, and that it was pretty dark, identity being stripped. How did you get out of that mindset?
Um, I was in a state of limbo, and not knowing what your future is, and you're completely paralyzed. It's surrounded by strangers, all saying that they're there to try to save your life, and it really. My commanding officer called my mom right away, and she was on a plane the next day to fly out to San Diego, and she was at my bedside the whole time, so that was really the only familiar face, and she was always there to hold my hand. Um, but apparently I was asking people, where am I? What's going on? Obviously I had a spinal cord injury. My neck was broken. My back was broken. And I was in traction. And there's no lights in the room, so you don't know if it's night or day. That you just have this fluorescent light bulb above you. And that, if anything, is difficult. It's almost, it's sleep deprivation on top of all the drugs you're on. Plus, I know I had a closed head injury. So it really wasn't until the 9th or 10th day that I realized, when the doctor came in and said, "You will not walk again. We're going to go in there, we're going to operate on you and stabilize your spine, but you can forget about your career as a SEAL team guy, and we're going to have to move on." And my mom was a little upset. He was a little too straightforward, but
Wow.
he didn't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
And I do recall this. My entire platoon came to my bedside the day before my surgery. And I remember thinking, again, I'm in the state of limbo, that maybe I'm dead. And they were all coming here to bury me at sea because they're all wearing their dress whites. I thought, what's the occasion? We never wear our
Yeah.
uniforms.
Wow.
And I remember the doctor telling me that he was going to try to put me back together again like Humpty Dumpty. But I do recall coming out of the operating room, they pulled the intubation tube out, and I asked the nurse, I said, "Am I alive?" And she said, "Yes, you're alive."
Wow.
So really from that point forward was when I started planning for the future as a paralyzed veteran. And I was very ill. Besides that, I had a real serious infection in my surgery, or I had my surgery in the back of my neck, and Balboa Naval Hospital just wasn't able to fix that problem. And against normal protocols, the VA had me transported over to the La Jolla Spinal Cord Injury Center,
Oh wow.
and that is where really my next life began. They quickly operated on me to get rid of the infection, and a representative of Paralyzed Veterans of America came to my bedside and said, "Well, you've heard the news. You're going to be paralyzed the rest of your life, but we're here to help you." And I signed my power of attorney over to them, and they did all those mountains, all that, I'm sure you've seen the paperwork trying to get
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
benefits at the VA.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming, and they know all the buzzwords they used.
And I'm sure in 91, the it wasn't as quite the digital age as that it is now. So yeah, I can only imagine that all the paperwork.
Yep.
Um, what would you say was the biggest support in ensuring that you didn't get the feeling, or that the feeling didn't linger, that, okay, it's over. My life, my life's over. I can't do anything. Like, how did you overcome that?
That's probably the easiest question I can answer today.
Good, good. Because a lot of people stay there, and so I think it's important to hear that.
When I was transported to the spinal cord injury unit, that that spinal cord injury building was built thanks to the efforts of Paralyzed Veterans of America. They lobbied Congress to have that unit built in La Jolla because there was a lot of veterans with spinal cord injuries who had to go as far as Long Beach to get their care. That's a couple hours up the road. So
Gotcha.
when I was admitted into that hospital, immediately representatives of Paralyzed Veterans of America were coming to my bedside, not just staff who were there to do all my paperwork, but other paralyzed veterans. They'd come rolling up, and
Mm.
there was actually the local president for the Paralyzed Veterans chapter was also a Navy SEAL. He was shot and paralyzed in Vietnam, and so he and I became close friends. And then another Navy SEAL came in a wheelchair, then another one, then another one. And I realized, like, we could put together an entire platoon of paralyzed SEAls. Not great for the recruiter, but
But you realize that you weren't alone.
no, there's something that we refer to as the brotherhood. I'm sure every military unit refers to the brotherhood, but
Yeah.
there's something to be said about two paralyzed veterans. We have so much in common.
When and how did you get into your mind that, okay, LA Marathon? Yeah, I'm doing that.
So when I was laying in bed and I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, a paralyzed veteran asked me if I would want to volunteer at the local chapter. There was something called the Americans with Disability Act had just passed, and they needed someone to become well, we start off as a volunteer to help use the Americans with Disability Act to help make San Diego more accessible for people with disabilities.
Okay.
And as I was volunteering there, I was also approached by an old swimming buddy of mine who wanted me to help him coach the swim team at UCSD, University of California at San Diego.
Yeah.
But when I was coaching there, I really felt so different sitting on the pool deck in my wheelchair. I just felt like I was removed from the action. And despite the best efforts of my physical therapist trying to get me involved in sports, I just didn't want to bring attention to my disability. And but there was also that disconnect looking at my swimmers in the pool. I didn't know
Mm.
what I wanted to do. I knew that sports was a useful tool in my toolkit, but I didn't know how to use it until I met a paralyzed veteran named Carlos Melita. He was a Navy SEAL. He was paralyzed in Panama during the Noriega thing. And
Oh wow.
we got to know each other sitting out front of the VA hospital. He says, Al, considering the level of injury and your background, you'd make a great athlete and maybe even make it to the U.S. Paralympic team. So that was the aha moment, that it was Carlos Melita, a fellow Navy SEAL who was paralyzed, motivated me to get involved in wheelchair sports. And so I went to my recreational therapist, and she was excited that I would finally pursue sports.
She had been waiting for you to do sports.
So yeah, she tried everything to get me to do sports, but I just wouldn't go there. And I have to admit, I'm stubborn. That has worked in my favor and against me sometimes.
Sure.
But yeah, and I mean, as soon as she found out I wanted to, oh my God, she was providing me with equipment, coaching. She would take me out to the track at the local high school track, and we'd work out there. Her husband was a quadriplegic, so he would teach me techniques. And
Wow.
my first real big competition was the National Veteran Wheelchair Games, which is produced by Paralyzed Veterans of America and the VA.
Hmm.
And that's where I saw 600 fellow paralyzed veterans racing wheelchairs.
I think it's amazing that, okay, you left Indiana because you're like, okay, the Olympics is out of my reach, and how it's kind of come full circle that it was now attainable after your service.
I think one of the things that motivated me to get involved in racing was seeing people who were truly athletic. It wasn't a pity party. It was more, these are real, true athletes who've trained their asses off to become elite athletes. And I started off in track events, which were, the 100-yard dash. Then it was the 800. Then it was the mile. Then it was 10Ks, getting onto the road. And then someone dangled that little carrot of saying, let's see if you can do a marathon. And I think it's safe to say that you don't have to do a marathon every day to train for a marathon. You train maybe 10 to 12 miles a day. And then
Yeah.
you had mentioned the LA Marathon. I went up the road to LA, and there were athletes coming from all over the world thinking they could win that race. And I guess you could consider me almost local. And I was a newbie. And I would say I was about 13, 14 miles into the race, and I realized I was in second or third place. I thought, wow, I actually might be able to pull this off. And in the last mile, I passed a guy from Switzerland called Christoph Etzeldorfer, and I beat him by about a second or two. And I couldn't believe it. I
Wow.
actually won the LA Marathon, and I set the
Wow.
record for the course. So I thought maybe this is something I can really hang my hat on. And that's when, shortly after that, I went to the U.S. Paralympic trials, and I made the U.S. Paralympic team. And it was such an honor to represent the United States in Atlanta as a member of the U.S. Paralympic team.
Yeah, and now you ended up winning the LA Marathon twice, right?
I won the LA Marathon in, I think, 96 and 97,
Got you.
or
Now,
95, 96. I can't remember.
gotcha. Now you went to you went to the '96 Paralympic Games. What events did you compete in?
I competed in I think it was the 800, 1500, 5,000, and marathon. I think I got that right. In order to make the team, you had to be able to compete in multiple events. You
Gotcha.
didn't just show up for one event.
Oh, I didn't know that. Did not know that. Now we always hear about the Olympians, Olympic Village. Is there the same concept for the Paralympic Games?
Yeah, so the U.S. The reason they call it Paralympics is because it's like paralleling the real Olympics. And
Yeah.
so the Paralympics are always held about 2 weeks after the regular Olympics, and they're actually held at the exact same venue. And I have kind of a funny story. That year the Olympics were in Atlanta,
Yeah.
and
Didn't have to
they
go far.
built the Olympic. No, that was great. It certainly made travel cheap. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the venue where the Olympic Village was located was, I think, University of Georgia or Georgia Tech or something like that. Whatever school is in Atlanta, and lo and behold, the dorms were built on the world's steepest hill,
Oh my God.
and so you've got thousands of guys in
Oh
wheelchairs
my
living on the
gosh.
ridiculously steep hill.
Oh my gosh.
So they created this electric golf cart bus that would transport us up there, and it was not accessible. Guys were like, I can't transfer onto this little electric train. So we would just hold on to the side of it, and they would pull us up. And then unfortunately, somebody fell, and it was like a peloton. Just like one guy went down, then about 30 guys all went down.
Oh my gosh.
And then they had to get high school students to volunteer to push guys up the hill. And the guys' egos are like, I don't want a kid pushing me up a hill. It just was and the rooms were not accessible. You had 12 guys in wheelchairs trying to use 2 bathrooms.
Wow.
It was just a mess, and the transportation was horrible. If you indulge me just a little bit,
Absolutely.
the opening ceremonies was hours long. It was, they got us in the queue to march into the stadium hours ahead of time. And it was really cool to see Christopher Reeve talking. He was in his wheelchair then,
Mm.
and that was all the cool stuff. When we got into the stadium, it was relatively empty. And then when they transport us back to the Olympic Village, the bus would pull up, the door would open up, and a little elevator would come out to pick us up. But by the time the first guy in a wheelchair got in the bus, all the other ambulatory athletes were filling in through the back door. So you'd only get one guy on a bus at a time to get back to Olympic Village. So 3 or 4 in the morning, there's thousands of guys in wheelchairs.
Wow.
They hadn't been home yet.
Wow.
And so the U.S. Paralympic Committee contacted Paralyzed Veterans of America because we put on the National Veteran Wheelchair Games every single year. It's the largest annual wheelchair sporting event in the world.
Yeah.
And so we knew how to take all the seats out of the buses, build ramps and platforms so you could really get the maximum amount of athletes in wheelchairs onto a bus as quickly as possible.
Efficiency, logistics, all of that. You guys had all that down.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was pretty proud of PVA at that moment.
Well, sure. Now the trials are coming up for 2021 for July. We got the Olympics this year. Do you have any advice for any of the athletes who are looking to compete this year?
If you're looking to talk to me right now about that, you are woefully behind. Trying to get to the Paralympics is something that takes years to do, and you missed the bus, I'm afraid, if you're just now thinking about it. It's
okay. Let's look forward to the next one. Someone is just thinking, I can do this if I start training today. Maybe they can't make 2021, but maybe they can make. I don't even know that the years are off now because of COVID, but they want to go to the next one. What would your advice be to them?
Well, the challenge with Paralympics is just like the Olympics in that it only happens every 4 years. I have to say that the Paralympics for me was my first really big international competition. And so I guess you could call me a rookie. And I wish I had more experience under my belt before doing that event. So I would advise any wheelchair athlete who is trying to pursue the Paralympic team that they get some international competition under their belts. And that includes traveling to Europe or Australia, wherever you need to go. It's not so much how many races you have under your belt. It's really learning how to race. There's a lot of strategy involved, and people have different styles of racing, and it does help to know people that you're competing against. When you're doing a marathon, believe it or not, it's very rare that somebody sprints out front at mile 1 and stays out there all by themselves the entire time. This is probably a story about life in general, but if you're going to win that race, you're going to need to work with other people. And often you'll find a pack in the front where you're drafting behind somebody else, and then you take the lead and somebody drafts off of you. And you just got to know who you want to draft behind and who you want to work with, because not everybody has the same ethical standards as you might have. And but yeah, it's
sounds like NASCAR.
And there's a lot of ego involved, and you can work together as friends, but in the last mile or two, you're gonna be on your own. But you need experience. You can't just come out of nowhere and win a race. That's almost impossible. It's unheard of.
Gotcha. Other than the LA Marathon, I guess. Real quick, if they were looking for a competition, if they were looking for different competitions to look into, what would you recommend as far as a couple? Well,
certainly in the United States, you have your national, track championships. Let's say you have your big races like LA Marathon, Boston Marathon. Boston Marathon's a real good example. You can't just show up to Boston. You have to qualify for it. So you have to figure out what marathons in the United States are qualifiers for Boston.
Gotcha.
It's the same thing goes for international competition. Sometimes you have to do preliminary competitions in order to qualify.
Very good. Very good. What gave you the idea to do a transcontinental triathlon? Where was your start and end? And what events did you do when? Like at what? Because you did a triathlon, so obviously you did different things at different places.
So I was mostly a marathon person in 10Ks, but longer distance races was definitely my forte.
Mm,
And I was at a fundraiser where they used a triathlon with celebrities and disabled athletes to help raise money for athletes with disabilities.
yeah.
And a gentleman came up to me and said, um, I kind of know a little bit about your history and was wondering if you had some time, some free time next spring. I'm going to go from LA to New York. I was wondering if you'd want to do so in your wheelchair. And I said, "You got to be kidding me." Um, yeah, I didn't know how to prepare for it. I said, "How do you prepare for something like this?" And he says, "You can't. It's just you're going to be in your chair, 8, 9, 10, 11 hours a day."
What was the reason behind it?
It was called the Transcontinental Triathlon for Life, and Jim Howley, who was the organizer of the event, um, had overcome some of the complications of HIV and AIDS through the sport, and he wanted to convey to people with disabilities and illnesses that sports is a way to overcome those challenges. And so he asked me if I could find others that might want to endure the same torture. And I found a friend of mine who lost his leg, who was a Paralympic athlete, and a woman who had lost her eyesight and hearing to some illness, and she was a velodrome cyclist. So the four of us started at Santa Monica Pier, and we completed about 3,600 miles. We ended up in New York City about 65 days later. The bigger markets like Denver, Las Vegas, Philadelphia, we would meet with the mayor and they'd declare us, Transcontinental Triathlon Day or whatever, and we'd
Yeah.
give out sports equipment or running shoes that were donated by Adidas, and we give them out to kids at risk. But basically, the message was overcoming your challenges in life through sport,
That's very cool. Very cool.
and that's basically my mantra.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, did you do different? It said triathlon. Were there different things like swimming and?
Yes, as much as I tried to avoid swimming, the guy says you're going to have to swim if you're going to go to this triathlon. So I I bought a wetsuit and jumped in the pool and did about a total of 25 yards. I said, okay, I got it. And boy, did I not plan for this. But um, we started off, most of it, yeah, it's a triathlon, right? So you're running, biking, swimming. But obviously, I can't use my legs, so it's all in the arms.
Yeah.
Most of it was cycling. And I have a hand cycle where I lay on my back and have the chain rings in my face and the
Oh, wow.
gears are down by my ankles. But it's called a crank cycle or a hand cycle, excuse me.
Yeah.
And that is the one way of getting the furthest, the quickest. For running, I sit more in like a cannonball position and lean over my knees and push on the back wheels when I have it's about 6 feet long and there's a smaller wheel out front. I use that for running. And then swimming, I just tie my ankles together and put my head down and swim. It's for me, it was very uncomfortable. The first swim we did was across the Colorado River in Moab, Utah, and that water temperature was 47 degrees, and it
Oh,
was really just
geez.
a bunch of melt off from the mountains. It was a
Yeah.
lot of debris. The water looked like a chocolate milkshake, and we had to notify the local authorities so they would have a boat with lifeguards in there
Sure.
to catch us if we didn't make it to the other side. And there was some waterfalls and a bridge downstream that they were worried that we would go over. And as much of a challenge as it was for me, the woman who was blind and deaf, we had to tie her with a rope to Jim Halley, and she was she knew that the rope came untied, and she knew she couldn't hear us, she couldn't see us, but she knew that we were panicking to come get her, and we would be embarrassed if a lifeguard had to come rescue us. But
Yeah.
somehow, some way, we landed perfectly in front of the media. We're exactly where we were supposed to land. Of course, we were covered head to toe in 47-degree mud, and
Yeah.
boy, was it a miserable experience. But I was just so happy with myself that I was actually able to do that. And then we swam across parts of the Mississippi and Lake Erie and Lake Michigan. But really, the majority of the race, of the triathlon, was really mostly cycling. We could have done it faster, but we had to keep on a schedule because we had, certain ceremonies with mayors that we had to attend. And the most stressful days were really not the days that we were out there pedaling on the road with the tumbleweeds. Really, the most stressful time was our days off, because we were scrambling to find bike shops to fix our equipment. We ran out of money very quickly. Our sponsors backed out, and
Really?
yeah, sponsors donate because they think they're getting something in return. And when you are only covering anywhere from 60 to 100 miles a day, and you're in the middle of Nevada, no television crews are going out there. No newspaper people are going to go out there. We're out there on our own. We might as well have been out on the moon.
Interesting.
And of course, the internet didn't really exist back then, so you didn't have Facebook, you didn't have Twitter. So
yeah.
It was we had this really scramble to get media attention. And you know what? Who was about a day ahead of us was a guy that wrote a diet book for Oprah Winfrey. He was stealing all of our media.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, it was just him.
Yeah, but I think as far as you went through the Continental, I'm sure you picked up media at some point. Hey, Chicago, and as soon as you get to some of the bigger markets, I'm sure it picked up, and the sponsors just missed out.
It was the local newspapers that would, we'd have to call them and tell them what we're doing and beg them to come out and cover the story. If the mayor's going to be somewhere, he or she's got their own media people.
Yeah. Very good.
But I wish, had we done it today, it would be a different story. I think we would have been able to get our message out better. But I know I benefited from this personally tremendously. But I know that we did change lives as we were going across country, and we did coordinate some of it with the many Paralyzed Veterans of America's chapters that we have going across country. They helped us get media, and we could always use a couple of guys on the side of the road cheering us on.
Any want or desire to do it today? You talked about now that we have Facebook and Instagram.
No. I have no desire to do anything like that ever again.
Very good. Very good.
I'm married, so she wouldn't let me anyways. When Jim first asked me to do this, I said, Jim, let me think about this. And I went home and called my mom, and my mom says, you're not serious. You're not really going to do this, are you? And that's when I realized I'm going to do it, because I always did whatever my mom told me not to do.
There you go. Yeah, I always did whatever anybody told me I couldn't do.
Exactly.
That was why I joined the Marine Corps. Instead of the Air Force. You look more like an airman. Yeah, no, you know what? I'm going to join the Marine Corps. How about that?
That's what my mom said. When I told my mom I was going to join the Navy, she says, you're not going down there. You're not going to join the Navy, are you? And I joined the Navy. So you're right.
Outstanding. So you're the former president of Paralyzed Veterans of America. You've mentioned it many times. It's a nonprofit that we spoke about personally on this podcast, either in we either in episode 157 or 160. It's where we broke down the VA's assistive technology program. On the episode, their representative Ursula Draper, I think she kind of started the program. She talked about how PVA works very closely with VA's assistive technology program. And I remember her saying that you have an office in their spinal cord unit, and that you help paralyzed veterans fill out all the paperwork for those so they can receive their entitlements, help provide equipment. PVA is it's a nonprofit that my grandfather donated to personally.
Oh, good.
He never served, but he had the calendars and everything. And I just remember PVA, and he had a real feeling towards wanting to help to take care of wounded veterans and paralyzed veterans. And I remember from the time that I was 18, he would always ask me from the minute I joined the Marine Corps, "Hey, do you know about this organization?" Like he had no idea what it was about. He had no idea what it was. He just knew that he was trying to figure out a way to help paralyzed veterans. And he would always ask me, "What do you know about that?" I was like, "Grandpa, I'm in the Marine Corps. I don't really interact with the nonprofits. So I'm not in the veteran community. I'm still active duty." But I always remembered PVA because I'm a grandpa. How is PVA able to work that closely with the VA program? Because we know there's all kinds of rules when it comes to nonprofits working in tandem with the government. So how are you able to make that partnership happen?
Back in World War II, World War One, if you got paralyzed, you didn't live but a couple of days. In World War
Yeah.
II, there was the advent of antibiotics, and that allowed our veterans to start living longer. And it was paralysis was something that nobody ever survived before. And so you had all these guys coming back from World War II that were paralyzed. They were just basically either warehoused or out in the community, and then they just kind of disappeared. So a handful of paralyzed vets said, one voice doesn't get us very far, but if we have one collective voice, we might get a little bit further. We need accessibility. We need college education. Voc rehab. We need help with healthcare. We need long-term healthcare. Something that will be taken care of for the rest of our lives, and the VA doesn't know what to do with us. So they established the Paralyzed Veterans of America in 1947. And it was such a novel
Mm.
organization and such a novel, now survivable disability that nobody was familiar with, that Hollywood got involved. And the president of Paralyzed Veterans of America at the time sold a story. It was mostly based on himself to the Hollywood producers. And it was Marlon Brando's first leading role in a film. And the movie was called The Men.
Really?
Yeah, 1952.
I had no idea.
And it talks
Wow.
about a veteran, an officer who was shot by a German sniper, and comes home and is introduced to 20 or 30 other guys living on a spinal cord injury unit. Actually, it wasn't even a spinal cord injury; it was just a general med surge unit that all these guys were being warehoused. They weren't leaving the hospital; they were afraid, and he wasn't going to be a part of that. He wanted to get out, and he met a beautiful nurse, and the two of them got married. And you know,
Huh.
Hollywood, it falls apart, then it gets back together again, and there's a happy ending. But that's really the introduction to Paralyzed Veterans of America. So that is why probably your grandfather knows us, is that PVA came to the forefront in the 1950s, and then when Vietnam happened, we had
Ah.
just a tidal wave of paralyzed veterans coming back from Vietnam. In 1972, I think it was, Life magazine did a story on paralyzed veterans that were being warehoused in VA facilities throughout the country, and the conditions were deplorable. And the VA was so embarrassed that and wanting to fix the problem that they contacted Paralyzed Veterans of America. And that's when we established our medical services department, where we now employ architects, doctors, nurses, and we've become the experts. We know more than the VA does about spinal cord injury care. And so we then also worked with the VA to, we established a standard of care, how many wheelchairs we get, annual exams. We have to standardize, wound care, urology, all that stuff. We came up with a playbook, a standard of care that all veterans with spinal cord injuries should receive from the VA hospital. And then we went to Congress and had it legislated. So basically, it's a law what the VA has to provide us.
Yeah.
So then our medical services go to every one of the 25 spinal cord injury centers across the country and audit the quality of care that our veterans are receiving. So PVA staff actually interviews all the clinicians, even the admin staff, the patients, and we find out whether or not the VA hospital is living up to our expectations when it comes to quality of care. And those reports are given to the secretary of the VA, and they go no further. When I say that, I mean they're not made public. It's a gentleman's agreement between PVA and VA. We don't want Congress getting a hold of those because they can certainly make political hay out of it.
And that's not what it's about at all. It's about at the end of
No.
the day, it's just about taking care of the veteran.
And that is the common bond that the PVA has with the VA, is that we're here to serve the veteran. Now, the VA has something like over 9 million patients to deal with, and we have to be that squeaky wheel.
Sure.
But it certainly has paid off. We have an office building about a block away from the VA headquarters in DC. And at
Oh,
any
wow.
given day, you'll see PVA employees going back and forth on the sidewalk. The VA has offered office space in the VA headquarters for PVA employees to help adjudicate some like our appeals department.
Sure.
Every spinal cord injury center has a PVA employee working there as a service officer to help paralyzed veterans get their benefits. And if they have any issues with quality of care, that they certainly run it through our service officer there. They are Johnny on the spot. And so PVA
Wow. So
is,
you're pretty deeply ingrained.
we're embedded, I think is the term.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. So it turned in from a Life magazine to a partnership that's been held to this day. I had no idea.
Yeah. And, thanks to that partnership, paralyzed veterans in World War II were living a couple weeks to, if they didn't get any infections, maybe give them a couple of years. But nowadays, thanks to the partnership between Paralyzed Veterans of America and the VA, we have patients that are living over 100.
Yeah.
PVA lobbied Congress to get a long-term care facility built in Long Beach, and their very first patient lived to be 102, I believe.
Wow. Now, when you were president of the organization, what was one thing that was a priority for you?
Paralyzed Veterans of America really saved my life on a number of different occasions. And that's not hyperbole. Literally, if they had not come to my aid, I don't think I'd be talking to you. And I felt like not only did I need to pay them back, but I also wanted to pay it forward. And thanks to some of my brethren, my brotherhood, they mentored me and helped elevate me to be the president and CEO of Paralyzed Veterans of America from 2014 to 2017.
Mm.
And what I found was that because of the incredible work that all of these Vietnam veterans had done, my life is so much better. But those Vietnam veterans are in their 70s, and I felt like we needed to have someone speaking for the newest generation of veterans, but not forget where we came from, of course. And that was one of my biggest challenges, was gaining the trust of the former generation while also having the trust of the current generation. Um, it was really a remarkable, rewarding experience. Being able to testify in front of Congress and represent all the veterans that we serve. I did notice something, that when you're testifying, the hard questions about healthcare were directed at Paralyzed Veterans of America. That seems to make us different from all the other VSOs, is our knowledge of specialized healthcare.
Mm.
That's one of the reasons why we work with blinded veterans, is they too are a specialty healthcare focused organization.
Yeah.
And but we work with all the VSOs. Matter of fact, I don't want to get off target here, but Paralyzed Veterans of America works with disabled American veterans and veterans of foreign war to develop the independent budget, and that is something that Congress uses as a tool to develop the VA's budget every year.
What's that? What's the independent budget?
So the independent budget is something that disabled American veterans, veterans of foreign wars, and Paralyzed Veterans of America work together to provide a roadmap for Congress and the VA as far as benefits and healthcare, as well as employment and education for our veterans. So we will break it down into what the critical issues are. We'll identify those critical issues, and then how we would recommend fixing those issues. And those recommendations are pretty well detailed, and it's the veteran's voice playing a role in helping helping to make the VA better, helping make Congress be better overseers of the VA.
Yeah.
And in the end, what matters most is that the veterans are benefiting from it. I remember when I first got started, it was hard to get Congress to go along with our independent budget. But since 9/11, I remember that first budget coming in, and the Bush administration actually recommended more funding than what we had recommended. So we were
Wow.
very happy, and it's great to see that the Congress and the VA are listening to us.
So when we talk about nonprofits, what's the difference between a nonprofit and a VSO? That's the difference, big time.
So after 9/11, there was something like 45,000 charities that all wanted
Yeah, I think we're up to 56,000 now. So last year is what I heard. Yeah. So
a lot, and a lot of them are just mom and pop. Some of them are just barely meeting the standards of the IRS.
yeah, but there's a lot. But there's also a lot that do a lot of good too, though.
Oh, absolutely. I think most of these charities want to do the right thing, but they don't have the knowledge and the history like PVA. And so we're actually chartered by Congress. A lot of people don't know what that means, but basically that was something they did up until recently, that it's Congress's recognition that you are experts in your field.
Yeah.
And it was back in the 70s and 80s, I know, that we received our charter, and basically it was Congress saying that Paralyzed Veterans of America knows what they're talking about and they should be heard.
Gotcha. Very
And
good.
that's really it's something it's like our secret weapon.
Very good. So that, yeah. So, if you're running a nonprofit out there, you're listening to this episode and you're always wondering or if you're a veteran, you're always wondering what the difference is between a recognized VSO and a nonprofit. That's it. That's it right there.
Yes. And like DAV, VFW, PVA, AMVETS, those are the ones that
The Legion, I think the Legion's another one.
the Legion, another good one. So Vietnam veterans also, they, those big sixes, I think is what they refer to. We often work together because we've been doing this for so long.
Very good.
And what's really neat is just that it's veterans speaking on behalf of veterans. Up until the 70s and 80s, being a veteran was almost a prerequisite in order to serve in Congress.
Yeah.
But in 2016, 15, 14, when I was there, they had barely 16%, 17% with military service. And so that made them rely even more on Paralyzed Veterans of America and other VSOs for their expertise, because they really didn't know what they were getting themselves into. It's, basically the Senate and the House's Veteran Affairs Committee is basically the board of directors for the VA.
Yeah.
And they have very little military experience.
Yep. Absolutely. Now you're still on the board, right, for PVA?
Yes, the way it works is once you serve as the president, and when you step down, you serve as the immediate past president.
Gotcha.
And so currently the Paralyzed Veterans of America is using me to help improve the quality of services that our chapters are providing our members out in the community.
What's the priority now, or now that PVA, or heck, what's been the priority over the past year plus with COVID? Are you operating any differently? Are you guys seeing new challenges? How are you mitigating those challenges? Because I'm pretty sure with your community, there are some unique challenges, especially when in terms of this disease that we're all going through.
Yes, in the past, the big challenges were, like the Americans with Disabilities Act, or some big thing like that. And then for a while, it kind of got quiet. Then all of a sudden, COVID happened, and boy, has it really changed the way we operate. Guys in wheelchairs used to be flying all over the country,
Yeah.
trying to fix our problems, and now we can't do that anymore, and we're having to rely on these computers to conduct business. Our membership really represents some of the most medically fragile veterans, and so we were in crisis mode, trying to figure out how can we make sure that our veterans are getting the proper care they need while they stay at home. I mean, the VA healthcare system was trying to deter patients from coming into the VA because, unless they really needed it. But, when you went into the VA, you weren't going to get any visitors. And so many of our veterans are in the hospital for months, sometimes years, and to deny them access to their family, which is their support network, is it's not right. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we're trying to figure out how do we get care delivered to the veterans at home. And so the chapters around the country, we're literally calling every single member of Paralyzed Veterans of America to make sure they had what they needed. And Paralyzed Veterans of
Mhm.
America took the lead in communicating with the members and communicating with folks like yourself to help us get the word out that we're here to help.
Gotcha. Very good. What are some of the specific challenges that you guys are running into with some of this, other than the communication aspect and not being able to fly around? Like say, you know, veteran, paralyzed veteran in West Virginia, what is he running into with the current status quo of America?
Well, when it comes to the members of Paralyzed Veterans of America, our biggest concern is that there's only 25 spinal cord injury centers around the country. So all of our 17,000 members and other paralyzed veterans, they have to get on airplanes
Oh, wow.
to get their health care. And so some are, driving 6, 7 hours to get to a hospital,
Yeah.
or they have to get on an airplane. And that's a real challenge. And with so many of us, and myself included, where I have a compromised respiratory system, uh, if I get COVID,
Yeah.
I'm in a world of hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I'm in my little bubble of my wife and my two little foster kids, and my 1,700 square foot condo has gotten a lot smaller over the year. That's for sure.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, has community care made an impact in some of those issues?
We were talking about the independent budget. That's one of our priorities, is getting the VA to work closely with people out in the community to help deliver quality care to our members. Unfortunately, the way it is set up right now, PVA doesn't have any oversight of care in the community. We only have influence in the
Well,
VA.
sure.
Our charter doesn't
Yeah.
does our charter doesn't necessarily allow us to. We can't have our service officer go ask a private doctor, "Hey, what's going on with Al Kovach's healthcare?" So,
Yeah.
and if you get paralyzed, if you're a paralyzed vet and you're out in the community getting care, and there's some mishap, you're going to have to go hire a lawyer to go fix those problems. The VA doesn't have that problem, but
Interesting.
I've had to go out in the community to get quality care. Excuse me, I had to go out to the community to get my health care, and I did not get that warm and fuzzy feeling that I get when I'm at the VA.
Interesting.
So
Very interesting.
because I know that there's no PVA looking over my shoulder, there to catch me if I fall.
Interesting perspective. I've never heard of it like that. That's interesting.
And again, the quality of care at the VA is so much better than what the community has to offer, and that's why we want our veterans to go to the VA to get their care. We really get nervous when they start going out in the community. Um, that's from the patient's perspective. Now, from the way PVA operates, um, we have a lot of virtual programs, like we have virtual hand cycling or yoga. There's ways that we can communicate with our veterans at home so they can feel like they're still engaged. The isolation is, well, I think if you haven't done a show on it yet, you probably will, in the increase in suicide and suicidal ideations that are going
Yeah.
on in our
Yes.
in the veteran community just because of COVID, and that is particularly the case with our members. I just talked to a paralyzed vet out in Montana, and boy, is he lonely. Um,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can only imagine.
and sometimes we're social creatures, right? And
Yeah.
we have our brotherhood that we want to remain in touch with. And Paralyzed Veterans of America and its 33 chapters have really gone miles to make sure that we stay connected.
I didn't think about going out in town and not having that warm and fuzzy of a VSO that's really digging in, making sure that they're giving you the proper care. Very good. Um, Al, what's one thing that you learned during your time in the military that you apply to what you do today?
Mission focus. I've really found that when I stay focused on the mission, whatever that might be, I stay out of trouble. Um, when it comes to the way I felt like I was leading Paralyzed Veterans of America, I had to assure all the people that I was representing that I had their best interest in mind, and that we were focused on improving the quality of life of all veterans, not just those of one generation or one gender
Yeah.
or the guys that served in the Navy. it, we were there for everyone. And there is one area of demographics that is increasing that we've been focusing on, and that is females. As you know, there are more females in the military. More females, therefore, are becoming injured, and females tend to get multiple sclerosis more often, and that is one of the conditions that Paralyzed Veterans of America certainly advocates to assist. When you say Paralyzed Veterans of America, it's not just a spinal cord injury; it's also the diseases, and I'm talking about multiple sclerosis and Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yeah.
You're not paralyzed just because of a bullet to the spine. And so the demographics, the younger guys and gals, the ones that are currently serving, they're in their 18s, 19s, and 20s. So there's been a bit of a shift. I think when we're dealing in the 80s and 90s, it was mostly we're just focused on men who were paralyzed in Vietnam, and our focus has had to change. And so, the old saying in the military is that adapt and overcome.
Al, is there anything that I may have missed or haven't asked that you think is important to share?
Um, PVA has taken a leadership role in spinal cord injury and disease. Um, we don't, even though our focus is on veterans, the work that we do actually, I hate to say it, but it has a ripple effect. It impacts millions of people with disabilities. PVA took a leadership role in getting the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. That we've got something like 60 million people with disabilities right now living in the United
Yeah.
States, and other countries are looking to us to see how they make their country accessible. When I say accessible, I'm not just talking about parking spots. I'm talking about employment and living and long-term care. The work that we do really has an impact on millions of people, not just paralyzed veterans. We also have developed not only a standard of care for our veterans in the VA healthcare system, but we've also we publish something called clinical practice guidelines, and those are available on the internet. And clinicians from around the world can go to our website and download um, how to care for a paralyzed person.
Al, is there anything that you would like to say to the audience that may be listening to this? Maybe it is a paralyzed veteran that doesn't know you exist, or that doesn't know PVA exists, or maybe it's someone that's caring for a paralyzed veteran, or maybe it's a VA employee. Is there anything that you'd like to say as like a parting shot?
I remember when I was first paralyzed, I felt like I was so damn lonely, that I was the only person on the planet that was going through what I was going through. But there are 20 million veterans out there, and only 9 of them are using the VA. And I wish there were, the other 11 million veterans would use the VA, because it is a wonderful source for quality care, despite what you might hear coming from Congress or the media. Um, you're not alone, and you're not the first person to go through what you've gone through, and you need to be able to swallow your pride and reach out for some help. And I think the first step, if you don't feel comfortable going to a VA clinician, reach out to Paralyzed Veterans of America or any of the other veteran service organizations that we talked about today, because you will be talking to a fellow veteran on the phone who can help you through